They came to witness the galaxy's finest predators, the apex of every world, the culmination of 1,000,000 years of teeth, venom, and evolution. The air trembled with roars and static. Massive viewing screens flickered as each cage opened in sequence, revealing nightmare after nightmare. Beasts so perfect in their design that nature itself had given up trying to improve them. Every delegate leaned forward, their eyes glittering with pride and fear. This was the grand menagerie, the showcase of dominance, the proof that civilization could conquer chaos. The Concorde chamber stretched a full kilometer, sealed under atmospheric stabilization, monitored by multi-spectrum drones. It smelled faintly of ozone and sterilized fear. Each delegation sat in their climate-sealed booths, watching their entry, their pride be revealed to the galaxy. Threx opened with the Caravox Hydra, a 3-headed reptilian siege beast whose blood burned the ground. Its scales were tungsten hard, and it hissed in infrared. The crowd recoiled in awe. Volunka followed with the Shadow Raptor, sleek, eyeless, and thought-reactive. It killed prey by projecting pain directly into their neural lattice, fully invisible to cameras unless sedated. Then came the Junar Titan, 2 stories tall, bipedal, 6 arms. It had to be cranially restrained to prevent it from solving its enclosure's locking algorithm. Each entry drew gasps. The crowd rippled with fear and reverence. This wasn't war. This was history, a pageant of evolution's most perfect threats. Then came the final pod. Designation, Sol 3. Origin, Earth. The announcer's voice lowered unconsciously. Earth was young, still carving out its treaties, primitive by genetic standards. They had no biosymbionts, no telekinetic breeding lines, no neural weaving. Their invitation to the conquered had been debated for 5 full cycles. Still, protocol was protocol. The lights dimmed. Steam hissed from the seals. The crowd held its breath, waiting for claws, for fangs, for something that could stand beside monsters. Instead, something sneezed. A tiny shape stumbled out, soft-skinned, wide-eyed, barefoot. A human toddler, clutching half a cookie and wearing 1 sock. For a moment, silence. Then the arena erupted in laughter. A camera drone zoomed in. The child blinked up at it, rubbing his nose. His cheeks were sticky. One of the cookie halves hit the floor. He didn't notice. Adorable, someone muttered. Primitive world, must be symbolic. A decoy, another suggested, amused. A statement maybe, said an avian diplomat. Nonviolence as apex? It was comforting to mock. The predators behind reinforced fields let out confused growls and shrieks as the small, dough-scented creature waddled closer to the center platform. The Concorde host began speaking again, clearly off script. Designation, Homo sapiens. Age, 2 standard years. Classification, pending. Age in. The toddler plopped down, cross-legged, started licking the remaining cookie. Delegates leaned back, smug. Next cycle, said a scaled ambassador. Let's hope Earth sends something that's weaned. More laughter. But the host flinched. The drone hovering over the child twitched. Then the child looked up at it. Something shifted. His fingers, still covered in crumbs, reached out toward the blinking red eye of the drone. The moment it beeped and drifted closer to scan, it brushed his arm. He froze. Looked at it. Scowled. Then, in that universal tone of primal ownership known to every parent on Earth, he growled, "Mine." The translator stuttered. Its matrices paused. The crowd watched the translation screens fizzle as the system attempted to parse intent. Tone-based diagnostics triggered territorial assertion alerts. Category: precursor to hostile engagement. Severity: escalating. The child stood, wobbly, cookie forgotten. The drone tried to rise. Too late. He grabbed it. 2 hands, fingers curled. The steel casing screamed. Not cracked, not dented, bent. The drone's diagnostics flared as servos overloaded. Internal components began to fry. The child gave a short, sharp scream, no word this time, just frustration, and slammed the drone against the alloy floor. Once. Twice. It sparked, smoked, then fell silent. The arena froze. Security protocol flicked on. Force fields hummed across each exhibit. Monitoring beams flooded the platform. The toddler sat beside the wreckage, breathing heavy, tears on his cheeks. Readouts surged. Adrenaline spike. Pulse 178. Cortisol elevation. Unclassified temporary muscular hypertrophy detected. Skeletal strain below stress fracture threshold. A doctor watching the telemetry spoke first. Those readings are impossible for that frame. He's not wearing augmentation, whispered another. Look at the bone density. Look at the way the wrist absorbed the impact. That should have torn ligaments. He's not even injured? The lead medic blinked. Just overextended. No tearing, no dislocation, just elevated fatigue markers. Silence reigned now. Not one diplomat spoke. Not one apex predator stirred. A Montari scholar frantically accessed the Terran archive. This specimen is not mature? Another confirmed. No, 2 rotations old. That's a pre-verbal development phase. Another flicked through footage of humans. Wars, rescues, builders working in volcanoes, engineers fixing satellites during active lightning storms, soldiers dragging others through blast fields while bleeding from open wounds. A still from Earth's Pacific front, a medic holding her own severed arm in a tourniquet while tending to 5 others. A miner in Antarctica, smiling as her face blistered from frost exposure. A child pulling a sibling from floodwaters, barefoot and hypothermic. The screens played them all. The room darkened with the weight of it. The toddler curled up beside the crushed drone. Sniffled. Mine, he whimpered again, this time softer. And the command went out again. This time it registered. The security drones approaching stopped mid-air. They hovered, then froze entirely. Inside the control booth, a technician screamed. His vocal pattern just triggered a level 1 override in the drone core. It's accepting ownership. How? I don't know. The recognition layer cross-mapped with assertive primacy, he imprinted. On everything. Can we counter it? Not without hard-wiping the core. So wipe it. Pause. I can't. What do you mean you can't? He locked the protocol. A soft sound came from the viewing box, where Earth's ambassador finally stood. He hadn't spoken yet. Now, he stepped into full view. Tall, calm, wearing a tailored diplomatic uniform of deep blue, his hands folded behind his back. His voice was quiet. You're asking the wrong question, he said. It's not what he did, it's what he is. The delegates stared at him. He's not our strongest, not our smartest, not even close. He nodded toward the sleeping child, now nestled against scorched steel and flickering drones. He's our youngest. The lights dimmed further. The camera feeds failed. And in the reports later sealed under 3 layers of Concord emergency protocol, one line would be underlined 3 times. Do not provoke species Homo sapiens. They begin claiming the universe before they can even speak it. The arena remained sealed for 3 hours after the incident. No official announcement followed, no declaration of fault, no condemnation, just the slow, unnerving quiet of a bureaucracy, unsure if what it had just witnessed was a technical error or a prelude to invasion. The toddler was asleep, cradled between 2 unresponsive drones. His tiny chest rose and fell in even breaths. Occasionally he hiccuped in his sleep, the residual sobbing reflex of exhausted emotion. One foot was still missing a sock. No one dared approach. Inside the observation tier, Concord officials moved behind shielded glass. Their voices were hushed, tense. The analysis feeds showed looping footage of the drone destruction, the override incident, and the final words spoken before full mechanical compliance. It wasn't just the force, it was the command, the raw instinctual declaration that bypassed the AI's priority tree and placed the child in position as a security sovereign. One of the monitors showed the word again. Mine. Tag. Ownership. Classification. Alpha tier imperative. Concord defense techs argued over whether the drone core was compromised. They tore into diagnostic logs, tried to replicate the error with voice simulators. Nothing worked. One engineer quietly asked, "What if it only works because he meant it?" They didn't answer. At the chamber's far end, Earth's delegation sat at a long crescent table. No panic, no gloating, just quiet, composed attention. The ambassador Jonathan Kearns had remained standing since the moment his charge had claimed the drone. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. When they finally turned to him, the insectoid chair of the council leaned forward. "You'll explain this." Kearns nodded once. "I will. Is this typical?" "No," Kearns said. "That level of override isn't typical." The council leaned back in relief. Kearns didn't blink. "It's instinctual." A long pause. "You mean to say," a Vakari delegate rasped, "that all human offspring are capable of this?" Kearns gave a slight shrug. "Depends on the child, depends on the moment. And the command override? We don't train for that. But humans, especially very young ones, don't recognize technological authority. They recognize personal boundaries. If something enters their space, touches what they view as theirs, they assert." He tilted his head toward the sleeping toddler on screen. Every species in this chamber had to domesticate its instincts to achieve peace. Humanity never did. We just learned how to give them rules. A thick silence fell over the chamber. The council reviewed the biological data. Again, high stress tolerance, unpredictable muscular activation, no augmentation. A mere 2 years into a species' life cycle that routinely exceeded 90. And despite stress, no neural collapse, no trauma markers, no injury. The child had slept through the last hour without fear. It wasn't just strength. It was resilience. One of the medtechs leaned back, shaking his scaled head. "I've treated war beasts who lost limbs and went into shock. This isn't right." Another spoke up, slowly. "I've studied evolutionary apexes. Predators peak early. Strength, instinct, aggression. Then they plateau. Intelligence and adaptability come later, if at all." "So?" The researcher tapped the screen. "This child isn't peaking. He hasn't even started." The implication sat like weight on the chest of everyone in the room. By the time they unsealed the arena, Kearns was already walking toward the containment field. He moved casually, hands visible, posture low. One of the drones still sparked feebly where the boy had crushed it. The security team had wanted to extract him via stasis scoop, but the request had been denied. Kearns didn't carry a sedative, or restraints, just a soft cloth and a juice pouch. The field deactivated with a soft chime. The remaining drones powered down fully, still locked in the last override command. The toddler stirred as footsteps approached. One bleary eye opened. Then both. He sat up, blinked at Kearns, and sniffled. "Mine," he muttered again, pointing at the crushed drone. "I know, buddy," Kearns said, kneeling. "You did good." The child frowned, rubbed his eyes. "Cookie gone." Kearns pulled a fresh one from his coat and offered it. "Got you a new one." The toddler took it, bit, chewed once. Then laid his head against Kearns's shoulder with a shuddering sigh of relief. "Yours now?" the boy asked softly. "No," Kearns replied. "We're each our own." The child smiled faintly, juice pouch now nestled in one arm. His fingers were still sticky with crumbs and carbon scoring. The cleanup drones wouldn't touch the wreckage until he was out of the room. That was a new protocol. They called it the Beastling Protocol within the hour. Quietly. No one made an official memo, but every world's representative filed emergency updates to their diplomatic channels. Security assessments were redrafted, species threat matrices rebalanced. Earth, previously categorized as young aggressor, was placed in a new, sealed category. Genetic apex, ascendant. A new term. Not for what humans were, but for what they were becoming. Later, in the temporary habitat wing, Kearns helped the boy into a medical cot. Not for sedation, just monitoring. A pediatric specialist from the Concord Council, neutral and trained in over 60 species, had asked permission to conduct a medical assessment. Kearns had agreed with conditions. No sedation, no restraint. No scanning without tactile introduction first. The child had a name, Lucas. He answered only when he wanted to. The medic, a A soft-voiced glider species from Illinara approached with a scanner and held it out like a toy. Lucas took it, squeezed it, giggled at the light it made. Then he held it back. "Yours," he said, generously. The medic smiled. "Thank you." His hands trembled as he ran the analysis. Kearns watched carefully. "Well?" he asked. The medic turned. "No implants, no genetic tampering, not even latent mutation factors." He paused. "Just bone, blood, and will." Kearns nodded. "That's what we sent." "Why?" the medic asked. "Why not send a trained apex, a soldier, a psychic?" Kearns leaned forward. "Because all those things can be countered, but raw, unfiltered instinct, you can't predict it, and if you can't predict something, you fear it." The medic lowered his scanner. "You wanted fear?" "No," Kearns said softly. "We wanted truth." That night, in a quiet corner of the Concorde's internal comms system, a message was flagged and redirected to a dormant channel reserved for interspecies threat alerts. It read, "If this is what Earth sends when it wants to be funny, we must ask what will they send when they want to win." The next cycle was cancelled. Officially, it was cited as a galactic transmission lag, causing delay in event protocols. But everyone knew the truth. The Grand Menagerie had ended the moment Earth's contribution bent an alloy drone with jam-covered fingers. Now, new protocols were being whispered into existence. Behavioral theorists from 6 systems were summoned overnight. Security liaisons demanded early access to Terran pediatric studies. And everywhere, from feeding halls to gravity spas, conversations danced around a single, terrible question. What happens when they grow up? Not if, not whether, when. The Concorde's Behavioral Threat Office established a closed working group named LUCAS, Logical Understanding of Cognitive Apex Species. It was classified, but the name was a joke that quickly lost its humor. The analysts were unprepared. Terran child development data wasn't just difficult to analyze, it was inconsistent, terrifyingly nonlinear, and deeply chaotic. At 3 years, some humans couldn't speak in full sentences. Others could dismantle their parents' security systems using only toy blocks and a persistent grudge. Emotional regulation was wildly undeveloped. One field report recounted a child placing a toy in a toilet because another child touched it. When asked why, the response was a single word: justice. Another researcher was shown a series of videos in which human children cried when denied something trivial, then tried again louder, more determined, until the adult relented. They called it the extinction loop. Every denial triggered a surge of stubborn will. Every pushback amplified their need to own, possess, define. Earth's ambassador didn't apologize for any of it. Kearns sat in private meetings with Concorde psychologists, explaining with calm precision that human development was shaped not by perfect control, but by confrontation. Obstacles are not avoided, he said. They are named, touched, tested, then claimed. Although, he showed footage of Lucas learning to climb stairs, falling, bruising a knee, crying, then trying again. And again. Until he did it. He doesn't know those stairs don't want to hurt him, Kearns said. He thinks they challenged him. One of the delegates stared, horrified. And he won? Of course, Kearns replied. That's how he knows they're his. Meanwhile, in the Concorde's pediatric observation chamber, Lucas was building a tower out of cups. There were 10. He'd taken 9. The 10th was deliberately placed out of reach. A minor test. He stared at it, pouted, then turned to the nearest security drone hovering along the ceiling. He pointed. Mine. The drone did not move. The override command had been hardened since the arena event. Lucas scowled. The technician watching the feed leaned forward. Lucas picked up his entire cup tower, waddled beneath the drone, and held it up like a bribe. Tower, he said. The drone tilted slightly. Lucas nodded, serious. Yours, then cup mine. The drone didn't respond. Lucas frowned, gently set the tower down, and walked away. 10 seconds later, he returned with a chair. The drone's camera narrowed. Lucas dragged the chair beneath the drone, stood on it, and grabbed the final cup. The drone beeped twice. Its targeting system recorded the movement. Not hostile, just calculated. Lucas placed the cup atop his tower. Raised both hands. Mine. The tower collapsed. Lucas stared at the rubble, blinking, then sat down and began sorting the pieces to start again. Did he just trade with the drone? One tech asked. No, he offered in exchange, was denied, then built his own advantage. The team watching the footage didn't speak. They watched the cup tower rise again. Slower this time, more stable. That night, Lucas slept wrapped in a towel, not because he was cold, because he'd decided the towel belonged to him. No one tried to take it back. Ownership, the analysts realized, was more than possession to humans. It was identity. The council met again the following day. Kern stood in the center of the chamber. No podium, no visuals, just the weight of every world's eyes on him. We've reviewed your files, the Avori diplomat said, and they are inconsistent. Some children are empathetic, others brutal, some are docile, others violent. You seem proud of this. We are, Kern said plainly. The council bristled. How can chaos be a virtue? It's not chaos, it's variation. He paced slowly. Every child is a new weapon, a new formula. Our species doesn't produce exact copies. We evolve inside ourselves. Individually, your apex predators grow toward a set path. We grow toward whatever the world dares to put in our way. And when the world doesn't challenge you, Kern stopped. We challenge it. The room darkened briefly as security feeds flickered. In the back row, one delegate from the predator world of Drax stood. His voice was low, careful. You're young, they don't fear dominance? Kearns gave a soft laugh. They don't understand it, they invent it. A pause. They give names to things and call them theirs, not because they're strongest, but because they believe, deeply, that the world is something to make sense of, to own, reshape, and protect. He turned toward the projection of Lucas, now playing with a coloring device on screen. They don't want to rule. Then what do they want? To matter. No one spoke. In private, the Concord's Defense Council updated its emergency index. Species, Homo sapiens. Subtype, minor stage juvenile. Risk category, ultra-adaptive territorial imprinting. Behavioral note, do not challenge for possession. If denied, specimen may escalate beyond containment. A red tag was added beside it. Likely imprint vector, everything. The Concord had a problem. Not a threat, not a demand, not a war. A problem. Lucas. Or, more precisely, Lucas's presence. Every species had rules, instinctual limits, a recognition of danger, territory, hierarchy. The predators in the menagerie were terrifying, yes, but understandable. You could calculate their ranges, predict aggression, design barriers. But the toddler's reach couldn't be measured in meters or biology. It was declarative. He didn't growl to warn. He didn't puff feathers or hiss. He simply looked at something, then decided it belonged to him. The problem was, the universe hadn't prepared itself for that kind of thinking. It began with the chairs. The ones in the Concord's temporary medhabitation ward weren't particularly notable. Slight curvature, neutral coloring, adjusted for multiple species' spinal alignments. Lucas liked one in particular, the orange one near the wide viewport. Every morning he walked to it, climbed onto the cushion, and sat. The second morning, a cleaning drone hovered nearby, attempting to move the chair for floor sterilization. Lucas stared at it. Mine. The drone paused, shifted protocols, attempted again. Lucas climbed off the chair, stood in front of it. His voice dropped, slightly hoarse from sleep. Mine. The drone halted. Its servos glitched. Then, shut down. On the third day, a diplomatic assistant unaware of the protocol flags tried to sit in the chair. Lucas saw. He sprinted from across the room. Yelled. Mine. The translator didn't even need to parse. The declaration vibrated through the assistant's bones. They left the room in silence, hands trembling. Security noted, no violence, no contact, just a feeling. Possession had been felt. The chair was listed as quarantined. Not because it was dangerous. Because it was claimed. The Concord decided to test it. Officially, it was called the Juvenile Environmental Behavior Calibration. Unofficially, it was known among staff as the Territory Test. The chamber was built for adaptability: walls, colors, toys, lighting, all set to neutral, nothing branded, nothing labeled. They placed Lucas in the room with 3 objects: a red ball, a soft blanket, and a multicolor cube designed for fine motor skill testing. Observers waited. At first, Lucas ignored the ball, grabbed the cube, turned it, pressed buttons, smiled. Then he turned and picked up the blanket, sat down with it, looked around the room, then said, "Mine." The ball hadn't moved. The observers leaned in, curious. Lucas got up, walked over to the ball, picked it up. Now he had all 3. He turned slowly to face the camera dome, held up the ball in one hand. "Mine." Raised the cube. "Mine." Lifted the blanket like a flag. "Mine." Then walked to the corner of the room, sat down, and wrapped the blanket around all 3 items. None of them had been taken from him. But something inside him demanded they be claimed anyway. Ownership, the analysts realized, was not about need. It was about definition. Everything within reach needed a name, a role, a relationship. And for Lucas, the default relationship was possession. The test escalated. Day 3. A wall panel with a built-in music emitter. Lucas touched it. Music played. He smiled. "Mine." Day 5. A ceiling light adjusted itself for reading brightness. Lucas pointed. "Mine." Day 6. Another child entered the room. A 4-year-old from the Ivori species. Gentle, cooperative, chosen for sociability. Lucas stared. The child waved. Lucas looked at the observers behind the mirror, then back at the child. "Mine." The room froze. The Ivori child tilted his head. "Friend," he offered instead. Lucas hesitated, frowned, then stepped forward and gently touched the other child's hand. "Mine," he repeated, but softer this time, less command, more question. The Ivori smiled and nodded. Okay. A new classification had to be written that night. Social imprinting behavior, ownership, layered attachment. Translation: human young might not separate the concepts of love, protection, and territory. They claimed people the same way they claimed chairs, toys, and security systems. And the reverse wasn't always true. Sometimes the claim came with violence, sometimes with care, sometimes with both. That evening, in a secure Concord medical office, Lucas underwent a voluntary brain scan, a low-field, non-invasive scan designed to detect stress markers during recall. He watched a recording of his own drone incident. Didn't flinch. When asked what he remembered, he simply pointed at the screen. "Mine," he said. "What part?" the technician asked gently. "The drone?" Lucas shook his head. "The sky." The technician paused. "You mean the lights?" Lucas looked up at the ceiling. "No, all of it. The room. The air. The arena." He hadn't claimed the drone. He'd claimed the situation. The event. The experience. The technician stood slowly and left the room. His final report noted a new neural behavior model. Event ownership bias. Definition: a developing human child may view any reality in which they act emotionally, physically, vocally as belonging to them. If they participate, they own it. If they feel, they define it. If they suffer, it is theirs. And if you try to take it away, they respond. That night, Earth's ambassador received an encrypted transmission. It came from a military advisory committee buried deep inside the Concord's bureaucracy. The message was short. "We have long feared war with a species stronger than us, then wiser than us, then faster than us. Now we fear something far worse. A species that believes everything it touches belongs to it." Kearns read the message, deleted it, then walked back into the observation room, where Lucas was drawing on the wall with a green marker someone had failed to confiscate. He had drawn a square, then a smiley face inside it, then stood back and pointed to the wall. Mine. Kearns sat beside him. He didn't correct him. He just nodded. Okay. On the 7th day, the Concorde officially closed the menagerie. It wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't the malfunctioning drones or the override failures. It was the quiet, collective realization that something had changed. That something small had arrived and disrupted the equation that held the galaxy's piece together. Every beast they'd paraded, every apex they'd roared into the world's cameras, was built to be perfect, perfect killers, perfect symbols, perfect survivors. But Lucas? He wasn't perfect. He tripped when he ran, got frustrated at puzzles, cried when his juice box leaked. Once, he hugged a pillow so hard it tore, and then screamed because it broke. And yet no one could stop watching him. No one could stop studying him. He wasn't designed. He was becoming. That morning, Earth's delegation received a formal request. A closed session, no press, no recordings. Not a trial, not an accusation. A clarification. Ambassador Jonathan Kearns stood before the High Concorde in the chamber, typically reserved for wartime declarations. Behind him, not a screen, not a slideshow. A door. Lucas entered, holding Kearns's hand, wearing a fresh shirt, pants that didn't quite match, and both socks this time. He carried a plush toy shaped like one of the Juanar apexes, the 6-armed monster that had once torn open battle tanks in the arena. Lucas had named the toy Steve. The Concorde chair spoke first. Why bring him again? Because you haven't asked the right question yet, Kearns said. The chair leaned forward. And what question is that? Kearns knelt beside Lucas, brushed a crumb off his shoulder, then rose and faced the chamber. You've asked what he is, what he means, what he wants. He gestured toward the child now playing quietly on the floor, murmuring to Steve in a tone that would later be determined to be a made-up language humans call pretend. But you haven't asked who he's going to be. The room tensed. Kearns continued. You've called him dangerous, unpredictable, terrifying. He nodded. You're right. A ripple moved through the chamber. But not because of his strength, not even his instinct. Because of something far simpler. Something your apex creatures lost in the process of perfection. He paused. Potential. One of the delegates spoke, a quadruped philosopher from Threx. Our beasts evolve, they mutate, they improve. Yes, Kearns replied, but they do it in response. Lucas builds in anticipation. He pointed gently toward the child, who was now balancing Steve on his head and giggling. Look at him. He learns without threat, adapts without instruction. Not because he was designed to, but because he wants to. A Vakari counselor tilted his head. What do you mean, wants to? I mean, we didn't program him. He doesn't have a purpose. He makes one. The room fell silent. Kearns stepped forward. You showed off your finest creations. We sent something else entirely. He paused. A blueprint. Lucas sneezed. The sneeze startled Steve, who fell off his head. Lucas frowned, picked Steve up, then looked around the room. He saw a ceremonial goblet on a nearby pedestal. Gold, bejeweled, reserved for council rituals. He waddled over to it. Pointed. Mine. A dozen internal alarms pinged. No one moved. The system had already reclassified the word. Not as threat, not as command. As signal. The request was clear. Claim through contact. The chair looked at Kearns. Will you stop him? No. Why? Because he's not doing it to you. Kearns knelt beside Lucas again, gently guiding the boy's hand away from the goblet. He's doing it to understand the world. Lucas looked up, not angry, not scared. Not mine? Not this one, Kearns said, but we can find one that is. Lucas nodded solemnly. Okay. He looked around the chamber again. Where? Kearns smiled. Anywhere you want. The Concorde voted within the hour. The menagerie was dissolved. Not banned, not forbidden. just rendered irrelevant. A quiet report was published internally. It was classified above military clearance. Its final summary read, Species, Homo sapiens. Developmental subtype, minor stage juvenile. Categorization, conceptual apex, emergent. Primary behavioral signature, ownership-driven interaction. Secondary signature, creative territorial redefinition. Note, species begins claiming its environment cognitively and emotionally, long before physical ability permits it. Systems responded not to aggression, but to perception of relational context. Possession was not enforced, it was assumed. No further testing advised. Observation only. Back in the temporary embassy quarters, Lucas was eating applesauce. Kearns sat nearby, reading a data slate filled with urgent requests from half the Concord's scientific academies. Why did he say mine? One asked. Does it trigger hormones? Asked another. Is it part of a broader protocol? They didn't understand. Kearns looked up as Lucas finished his applesauce, stretched, then pointed at the stars visible through the reinforced viewport. Mine? He asked, half joking, half hoping. Kearns walked over, scooped him up, and let him rest his head on his shoulder. No, he said gently, not yet. Lucas yawned, his breathing slowed. He whispered something soft, too quiet for the translator to catch. Kearns smiled. What did you say, buddy? Lucas whispered again. Someday. And with that, he fell asleep. A boy who had bent steel with bare hands. A boy who had told the galaxy that it belonged to him. Not with a weapon. Not with violence. But with a word. And every apex predator who had ever ruled a world knew, in that moment, what real dominance looked like. Not domination, but inevitability.